Hello, my friends, how are you? My name is Mr. Nightshade. I will tell you scary stories every day. Lonely houses, empty places, scary things. Everything is scary here. If you are interested, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you are from in the comments. Let's begin. It happened when I was 22. I'd just gotten home from a long night of stocking shelves at a small grocery store in Birmingham, Alabama. I worked the closing shift, so I usually got home around midnight. The streets dark and mostly empty, the buildings old and broken, and the air smelled like wet asphalt and exhaust. I shared a cheap apartment with my roommate Alex. The walls thin, you could hear every neighbor arguing or watching TV. I threw my coat on the rack next to the door and went to the kitchen to grab something to eat. I opened the freezer, pulled out a frozen burrito, and froze for a second. I remembered locking my bedroom door that morning. I always locked it. I like privacy. I stepped back into the living room and called, "Alex, hello?" No response. I flicked the hallway light on. Maybe he was playing a prank, maybe waiting to jump out of the closet. I walked slowly to my room. Nothing there. The usual twin bed nightstand lamp closed the door and went to microwave my food. I turned on the TV for a horror movie. Suddenly, thump, thump, thump from the hallway. At first I thought neighbors, now again. Closer, the silhouette of a tall man holding a butcher knife at the end of the hall. I froze. I ran down the stairs out into the parking lot, called 911. The cops arrived minutes later. Searched the apartment, nothing found except a note under the salt shaker. Soon written jagged letters. I couldn't sleep that night. Every corner of the apartment felt wrong. Every shadow, stretching impossibly, the air thick with something watching me. I stayed awake. Lights on the TV running. The building creaked and whispered, and I heard scratching from the walls. Low moans from my bedroom. I tried to tell myself it was the building. Settling the next day at work. My hands shook, stocking shelves, constantly checking my phone. The note burned in my mind. Soon replaying over and over. Alex laughed when I told him I didn't care. I stayed hyper-aware that night. The hallway lights. Flickered footsteps behind me, doors moving slightly. I could feel it watching me from the shadows, the whispers soft, low, calling John, John, John. I froze with fear. It grew louder the next night. Alex was late again. I was alone, cooking frozen food. While checking the windows constantly, the alley behind the building. Dark, narrow, I saw movement in the corner of my eye. Shadows across the window. The hallway, flickering footsteps behind me. I grabbed a knife, called Alex. No response. The shadow lingered, tall, thin, moving, slowly, breathing heavily. I ran down the stairs to the lobby emergency exit. 911 called again, minutes later. The building empty. Silent, but eyes watching the note under the salt shaker. Soon felt personal. I moved furniture, locked. Everything double-checked, windows stayed awake, listening to every sound. The scratching returned on the door and walls, rhythm heavy, slow, measured. I tried calling Alex, nothing. He ignored my calls. Shadows moving in the hall, shapes too tall, too thin. To be human, I recorded some of it on my phone, sent it to police. They came hours later. Set up cameras outside, pointing at the alley and entrance. I barely slept, listening to whispers. John, 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 shadows creeping closer. Every edge of my vision. I couldn't look directly, but I could feel it. The cameras caught movement. 2:37 a.m., tall, thin figure crouched low, then straightened, tilting head, wrong, eyes glowing bright white. Walked slowly across the alley toward the building, vanished. Police. Couldn't explain, no footprints. No forced entry. The next week I stayed with my cousin. Apartment called to me like something alive. The note soon burned in my head every time I closed eyes. Whispers through phone, static, low moans. I returned once to grab a few things. Door locked itself behind me. Breathing upstairs, shadows moving. I backed out, didn't go in again. I installed cameras, lights, motion sensors. Police checked remotely one night. 3:03 a.m., all feeds flickered. One showed silhouette. In hall, slowly moving upstairs, paused halfway. Head tilted, unnaturally, watching, waiting. I screamed, called police. They rushed over. Feed showed nothing. Shadows lingered, stretching impossible distances. Whispers louder than ever. It was calling my name, teaching me. Fear doors slammed on their own lights. Flickered air freezing, felt it behind me. Studying me. Studying Alex. anyone entering. Building note. Soon felt like promise, not warning, the final night. I stayed awake, fully alert, motion sensors, triggered constantly. Shadows, moving edges, cameras, alley, black, twisting, grabbed every light, flashlight, knife, bat, whatever, and weighted floor, creaking footsteps upstairs, doors rattling, whispers chanting. John. John. John didn't sleep, didn't blink. 2:58. AM feed showed it in kitchen, crouched, then straightening, impossibly tall, tilting head, grin too wide, glistening eyes white. I ran into hallway, it moved to block exit. I screamed, lunged, stairs floated. Not quite touching. Floor police rushed in. Couldn't see it, vanished into shadows. Scratches, marks, cold whispers felt real. I moved out next day, left everything behind, note. Soon, still on counter. Long after I left, never returned. Shadows followed me in memory. Every creak, every whisper, every corner. New apartment seemed familiar. Fear never left, feeling someone tall, thin, always watching, waiting. Police found nothing. Neighbors laughed at story. But I knew what I saw. Never stayed home alone again. Never trusted anyone with keys. Never left. Doors unlocked, passing street alley, feel eyes on me. Shapes, corner vision, whispers. John, 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 nightmares, figure, tall, thin head, tilted to side, grin impossibly wide. Glowing white eyes, don't know when it will return or if still in that building. But I know it's waiting soon. I never really thought much about being alone. Not in the way most people imagine. I mean, I was 13, living in Corbin, Kentucky, a place that feels like it's always halfway between nowhere and somewhere important. My house was on a quiet stretch of road that barely saw traffic, except for the occasional neighbor who waved as they drove past. And even then, only if you were out front. I grew up being used to space. Wide yards, high ceilings, rooms that seemed to go on forever. And yet somehow, I'd never really been alone. My parents were always there, hovering somewhere in the background, laughing at my stupid jokes, reminding me to eat, to sleep, to be careful. That night, all of that changed. They left for a wedding, Mom in her usual whirlwind of excitement, Dad grumbling about having to drive 2 hours to get there. They were happy, though, talking about how I could have the whole house to myself, and I smiled like I did, pretending it was thrilling. But there was a little voice in the back of my head, the one I always ignored, whispering that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't ready to be alone. The house was big, 2 stories, 4 bedrooms, a basement that was technically a spare room, but smelled like old furniture and cleaning supplies, and a garage that Dad insisted we keep spotless even though nothing ever went in there. The yard was open, with tall oak trees along the edges that cast long shadows when the moon was out. Out here you got used to quiet, too used to it. I spent the first hour after they left like any 13-year-old would. I raided the fridge, grabbed a mountain of snacks, and plopped on the couch in the living room. I tried to tell myself this was fun. Really, I did. I played some video games, kept one eye on the clock, imagining my parents were only a few minutes away, not 2 hours. But then, as the sun dipped and the sky darkened, the house began to feel different, bigger somehow. The walls didn't just echo my movements anymore. They seemed to watch me, stretching, waiting. I remember that first little sound. A tap, tap, like fingernails brushing against the back door. I froze, heart thumping like a drum in my chest. I told myself it was just the wind, or maybe the branches scraping the siding. But then it came again, softer this time, deliberate. I went to the door, peering through the window, expecting nothing but darkness. And there it was. Not a shadow, not a trick of the moonlight. A figure, standing at the edge of the yard, perfectly still. I couldn't make out a face, just the outline of a person, thin, taller than me, but not by much. I swallowed hard, backing away from the window. My phone buzzed on the counter, a message from Mom, probably checking in. I ignored it. I didn't want anyone telling me to calm down. I wanted to understand what was happening, and I couldn't if I kept hiding behind my own fear. Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. I wasn't keeping track anymore. I kept glancing at the figure, and every time I looked, it seemed just slightly closer. The streetlights didn't reach out here. It was just my house and the figure and the silence that weighed on me heavier than any sound. I tried to laugh it off, muttering that I was imagining things, that it was some neighbor's kid or a deer. But the way it stood perfectly still gave me the kind of chill that movies can't capture. The first phone call came just after 10. At first, I thought it was Mom checking in. The number didn't look familiar, but I answered anyway. "Hello?" I said, trying to keep my voice casual. A deep, low voice answered. "Home alone, are we?" I froze. My hand tightened around the phone. "Very funny, Dad," I said. My laughter strained and hollow. The laughter on the other end grew, soft at first, like someone clearing their throat, then louder, more manic, the kind of sound that makes your skin crawl. It wasn't Dad, it couldn't be. My stomach sank, my legs felt weak. I wanted to drop the phone, run, hide by, but I couldn't move. I checked all the locks. Every single one. The doors, the windows, the basement. I even checked the garage. Everything was secure, but the figure hadn't moved. Not at all. Just standing there as if it knew I was watching, as if it wanted me to see. Then the lights in the backyard flickered, our motion sensor lights. I thought it might be a car passing by, but there was no sound. No engine. Nothing. Just darkness and the figure, now closer than before, its silhouette sharp and unmistakable against the moonlight. The second phone call came moments later. Same deep voice, same words, but this time it whispered them, letting the silence stretch like a noose around my neck. I didn't answer. The sound of footsteps on the back porch made me jump, and then there was a knock. One knock, slow, deliberate. My heart nearly stopped. I wanted to scream, to run, to throw myself out the front door. But I couldn't. My feet felt cemented to the floor. I remember curling up in the corner of the living room, holding the phone like it was a lifeline, listening to the wind and the laughter, the soft scratching at the door. I didn't move for what felt like hours. When the police finally arrived, they said it was someone my father had worked with years ago, someone who held grudges, someone capable of things I couldn't imagine. They said the man had planned to come for him that night. The police had scared him off, but they warned me, and I'll never forget this, that he hadn't been caught yet. He was still out there somewhere. That night changed everything. I learned that being alone isn't about the silence or the empty house. It's about what's watching, waiting, and the realization that sometimes adults aren't always around to protect you. And even now, years later, when I hear a soft knock at the door or laughter in the distance, my skin crawls, because I know what it feels like to be truly alone, and to realize that home alone can be the most dangerous thing in the world. I thought I was safe when the police arrived. I really did. I remember the red and blue lights flashing against the walls of my room, the officers' voices calling my name, asking if I was all right. I tried to nod, tried to tell myself it was over. But deep down, even as I clutched the corner of the living room, shaking, I knew it wasn't. The figure, the laughter, the way those eyes had stared at me from the yard. It wasn't going anywhere. After the police left, saying they would patrol the area and that I should call if anything happened, I went back inside. The house was quiet again. But that silence was worse than any noise. It pressed on me, making me aware of every creak, every draft, every shadow that moved just a little too fast. I tried to tell myself it was normal. The house settling, the wind outside. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had stayed behind. I decided to stay in the living room, lights on, phone in hand. I scrolled through my messages, trying to look busy, trying to act normal. But I kept glancing at the back door, expecting to see, I don't know what. Just him, standing there again, that same wide smile, the same sharp teeth. My stomach twisted every time I imagined it. Hours passed, maybe minutes. Time had lost its meaning. And then I heard it. A soft scraping from the kitchen. Not loud, just subtle enough that I thought I might be imagining it. But I wasn't. I crept toward the kitchen, every nerve on fire. The flashlight I grabbed from the counter trembled in my hand. The kitchen looked normal. Dishes stacked neatly, the fridge humming, the faint smell of leftover dinner in the air. Nothing. And yet, I could feel it watching, waiting. I know it sounds crazy. I know it does. But there's a difference between knowing something in your head and feeling it in your bones. And I felt it. I decided to check the back door, the one the figure had stood behind. My hands shook as I unlocked it, slowly pulling the curtain aside. Nothing. Just the yard, dark and empty. But then I saw a shadow move. Fast. Too fast. At first I thought it was a branch, the wind maybe, but it wasn't. It was too deliberate, too human. My heart nearly exploded. I slammed the curtain shut and backed away, feeling tears welling up in my eyes. I tried to call my parents, but the line was dead. The landline. My cell had no signal in the back of the house. I was trapped, completely alone. Then I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate, not the house settling, not my imagination. Footsteps coming down the hall. I froze. Every instinct told me to run, hide, scream. But I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe properly. The sound came closer and then stopped. Silence. Then a whisper. Barely audible, like it was right next to my ear, though I was alone in the living room. "John," I screamed. I don't even remember the sound coming out of me. My legs moved on their own, running up the stairs 2 at a time. I didn't know where I was going. My room, maybe the attic, anywhere I could lock myself in. But the footsteps followed. Every creak of the stairs was mirrored by another creak behind me. I locked my door and pushed the dresser against it. My heart pounded so loud I thought they could hear it from outside. I grabbed the baseball bat Dad kept under the bed, holding it like my life depended on it, because it did. Hours passed. I don't know how many. I stayed crouched on the floor listening. The whispering came again, soft, circling the house. "John, home alone, so small, so scared." It wasn't a voice I recognized. Not Mom, not Dad, not the police. Something else. Something wrong. Around 2 a.m., I heard a crash, not upstairs. Downstairs. Something heavy hitting the floor, followed by the slow, deliberate scraping toward the living room. I held my breath, gripping the bat tighter. The sound stopped. Silence. Then the whisper again. Right outside my door. "You can't hide." I swung the bat at the door. I don't know if it hit anything, but the whisper vanished. I waited and waited. The night felt endless. The shadows of the trees outside stretched against the walls like fingers reaching in. By 4 a.m., exhaustion was setting in. I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't even moved from the corner of my room. The police had gone back on patrol, but I knew they couldn't protect me. I was alone. Completely. And then, just as the first hint of dawn touched the sky, I heard a laugh. Not soft, not faint, but the same manic, horrible laugh from the night before. Outside, in the yard. Close. Too close. I ran to the window, heart in my throat, and I saw him. Not a shadow. Not a trick of the light. A man, thin, tall, smiling that same impossible smile. Watching me, waiting, I slammed the window shut. I don't know how I didn't fall through it. I backed away, screaming for anyone to come. But the house was empty. The town was quiet. The world seemed to have abandoned me. By the time my parents returned, I was a wreck. Pale, trembling, mumbling about footsteps, whispers, laughter. They didn't believe me at first, but when they saw the front door ajar, unlocked even though I had checked, and the back window shattered slightly, they understood. The police came again. They searched the yard. No one was found. The man, he was gone. But I knew deep down that he wasn't. He'd been here. He'd watched. And he would come back. Even now, years later, I still hear it sometimes. Soft, almost playful at first, then louder, that horrible laugh. Waiting, circling, reminding me that the shadows never leave. That night in Corbin changed me. Forever. And I learned something terrifying that night. Being alone isn't about doors or locks or lights. Being alone is knowing that someone is out there, just waiting for you to let your guard down. Hey Reddit, it's me again, John. I didn't plan to write another post. Honestly, after what happened 2 years ago, I tried to move on. I tried therapy, moved schools, even begged my parents to sell that damn house. But the economy was bad, Dad said. The house was our legacy. I guess legacies don't mean much when they whisper your name at night. Anyway, it's been a few weeks since the weird things started happening again. I'm 17 now, but every time the sun goes down, I still feel like that terrified 13-year-old kid huddled under the covers waiting for the laughter to stop. At first it was small stuff. The back light flickering. Footsteps in the hallway when I was the only one home. I told myself it was old wiring, maybe raccoons. But then I started hearing it again. That voice. The same low, choking laughter I swore I'd never forget. It began 3 nights ago. Mom and Dad went out of town to attend a cousin's wedding. Yeah, just like last time. They left on a Friday evening, promising to be back Sunday morning. I didn't want to stay alone, but I also didn't want to seem like a coward. I'm older now, I told myself. It's just a house, just walls and wood. I regret that confidence more than anything. That night I was sitting in the living room with every light turned on, playing games to distract myself. It was close to midnight when I heard something outside. A dragging sound, like someone pulling a wet bag across the gravel driveway. I paused the game and muted the TV. Silence. Then faintly, drag, drag, drag. I grabbed the flashlight my mom still keeps on the counter, the same one from years ago. Its plastic handle was cracked, the batteries corroded. I forced it on and a dim beam shot out like a dying eye. I walked to the kitchen window and peered out. The motion light flicked on, and I saw it, the outline of a man standing just past the shed. Perfectly still. No face, no features, just a tall figure staring toward the house. I froze, every muscle locked. My throat felt like sandpaper. I wanted to scream, but my voice died in my chest. The figure didn't move. It didn't sway or shuffle. It just stood there under the pale light. I slowly backed away from the window, step by step, trying not to make a sound. My heart was hammering so loud it echoed in my ears. Then the motion light turned off. Darkness. For a moment, I thought I imagined it. Maybe it was just a tree, maybe... Then tap. A soft tap on the window glass behind me. I turned so fast I nearly fell. Nothing. The window was empty, just my reflection staring back at me, pale and shaking. Then from somewhere inside the house came a sound I will never forget. Click. The front door unlocking. I ran. I don't even remember crossing the hallway. I bolted up the stairs, slammed my bedroom door shut, and shoved my dresser against it. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold my phone. I dialed, "Son," but before I hit call, I heard the floorboards creak downstairs. Slow, deliberate steps. Whoever, whatever, was there wasn't rushing. They were exploring. The dispatcher finally picked up, and I whispered that someone had broken into my house. She told me to stay on the line, to stay quiet. But as she was talking, I heard it, faint, muffled through the floorboards, a laugh. Low, raspy, familiar. That same insane laughter from 4 years ago. The dispatcher asked me to describe the sound, but I couldn't speak. The voice started saying my name, over and over. John. John. Home alone again, huh? The door handle started to turn. I pressed myself against the wall, tears running down my face. The door rattled once, twice, then stopped. Everything went silent. Even the dispatcher's voice faded in the background. Then, a whisper, right beside my ear, inside my room. "Miss me?" The next thing I remember was waking up in the hospital. The police told my parents they found me unconscious in my room, the dresser tipped over. Every door in the house had been left wide open. No fingerprints, no forced entry, no one on the security cameras. But the cops said something that froze my blood. The landline phone had been ripped from the wall, even though I hadn't touched it. And next to it on the kitchen counter, someone had left a note written in shaky letters. "He's not done." The police assumed it was a prank, maybe trauma-induced hallucinations. But I know what I heard. I know what I saw. And last night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of that motion light flicking on again. I looked out my window. He was standing there, the same figure, staring up at my room. He raised his hand slowly and pressed one finger to his lips. Shh. I'm shaking as I type this. I never wanted to make another update. After what happened last week, I promised myself I was done talking about it. But when the police came, and what they told me later, I can't keep it to myself anymore. When I woke up that night, the flashing red and blue lights outside my window almost blinded me. I thought it was a dream at first. I could hear people shouting downstairs, boots stomping against wood. Someone was shaking me, calling my name. "John, John, can you hear me?" It was Officer Daniels. He's lived in Corbin his whole life, a family friend. When my parents ran into the room behind him, I finally started crying. Everything I'd been holding in, the fear, the shaking, the shock, just poured out. They found me unconscious against the wall, the dresser tipped over, the windows open. But here's the thing. The front door was still locked from the inside. Daniel said they did a full sweep of the property. Nothing. No forced entry. No signs of anyone outside. But one of the officers, a young guy named Harper, looked spooked. He wouldn't say much, just that he thought he saw someone moving behind the tree line near the creek before the motion light went off. They decided to stay a while, just to be safe. One car stayed parked outside all night. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, wrapped in a blanket, my mom crying quietly beside me while Daniels filled out his report. I couldn't stop staring at the back door, that stupid glass door that faces the yard. I kept imagining him standing there again, grinning. Around 3 a.m., something happened that made every single officer in the house draw their weapon. A voice came through the baby monitor. Yeah, we still had an old baby monitor in the guest room from when my cousin's kid stayed over. No one even remembered it was plugged in, but it crackled to life, this faint static, then a whisper. At first it was just mumbling, distorted, almost like a radio frequency, then clearer, closer, like someone right next to the speaker. John, tell them to leave. The monitor screeched with feedback. Harper dropped his flashlight. Daniels shouted for everyone to secure the exits. They ran through every room, but there was nothing. No footprints, no sign of entry. But then in the basement they found something. There was a handprint. A bloody handprint on the inside of the window. Small. Smudged. Almost like it had been pressed there from the outside before being wiped halfway through the glass. They took photos, samples, everything. The chief himself came by the next morning. They treated it like a possible break-in, but Daniels told my dad privately that the print didn't match anyone in the database. Not me, not my parents, not the officers, not the suspect from years ago. And it wasn't old. The blood was fresh. They didn't tell me this directly, but I overheard one of them talking in the hallway later. The way he said it made my stomach twist. The blood wasn't human. I tried not to think about it. But the next night, even with the police still patrolling the area, something else happened. At around 1:17 a.m., every single motion light outside the house flicked on at once. The dogs from 3 houses down started barking. I grabbed my phone and crawled to the window because, of course, I couldn't not look. There he was, standing in the same spot near the shed. But this time, he wasn't alone. There were 3 of them, all tall, thin, staring directly at my window. No faces, no movement, just standing in perfect stillness. I backed away, whispering for my mom and dad to wake up. When my dad came running in, I pointed to the window, but they were gone. Lights off, yard empty. Daniels came back the next morning to check the security footage again. He looked pale as hell when he came out of the office. He told my dad quietly that the feed from 117A had been corrupted, just static, for exactly 3 minutes. Then it came back on like nothing happened. When my dad asked if maybe it was a glitch, Daniels didn't answer. He just said, "Whatever's happening here, I think it's watching you now." Since then, weird things keep happening at exactly 1:17 a.m. every single night. The lights flicker. The TV turns itself on. Sometimes I hear that laugh again, faintly from outside. And last night, when I went to close my window, I noticed something carved into the wood of the sill. Something I know wasn't there before. It said, "I never left." I swear to God I can feel him nearby, waiting. The police still think I'm traumatized, but Daniels believes me. He told me something that's been eating at me since he left. When they dusted the house for prints, they found more than one set, and one of them matched the dead officer from the original case in 2008, the man who was murdered by my dad's coworker. So either someone's playing the sickest joke imaginable, or that thing outside isn't human. It's been 4 days since the last incident. 4 whole nights where nothing happened, no motion lights, no laughter, no weird sounds. For the first time in what feels like forever, I actually slept. My parents were trying to pretend everything was normal again. My mom even went back to her sewing room. My dad fixed the back fence and we ate dinner like a normal family. I wanted to believe it was over. The police still drive by every evening, but they stopped parking out front. Daniels told my dad they'd keep an eye on the place for another week, just in case. I think even he wanted to believe that whatever happened here was finished. The weird thing is, even with the silence, I can't relax. There's this feeling, like the air around the house is heavier than it should be. You know when a storm's about to start? That strange pressure in the air, it's like that, constantly. On the 5th night, my parents went to bed early. Around 11:30, I was in the living room watching TV with the sound low. I remember the clock showing 1:16 a.m. and I thought, here it comes. But the minute passed and nothing happened. No flicker of light, no whisper. Just silence. Then the power went out. Not a flicker. Everything died at once. The TV, the lamps, even the digital clock. Complete darkness. At first, I thought it was just another outage. I grabbed my phone to use as a light. But before I could even turn it on, I heard something. A soft humming sound coming from the hallway. Not mechanical, not like electricity. More like singing. A low, slow hum. Almost like a lullaby. It grew louder, and I realized it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from upstairs. I wanted to call out for my parents, but my throat locked up. The humming stopped for a second, and then came a whisper, almost right beside me. Don't wake them. I dropped my phone. Its screen hit the floor, and lit up just long enough for me to see something reflected in the TV screen across from me. A faint shape standing in the doorway to the kitchen. Tall, still, watching. Then, just as fast as it started, the power flicked back on. Lights, TV, everything, and the doorway was empty. I didn't sleep at all that night. In the morning, when I told my parents, they brushed it off as stress. My mom said I'd been through too much and maybe I heard the wind, but that wasn't wind, and I know what I saw. Or at least what I think I saw. The next night, I set up my phone to record the living room from 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. I didn't tell anyone. When I checked the video the next day, it showed nothing unusual, until 1:17:24. For exactly 3 seconds, the camera shook like something heavy hit the floor nearby. The picture glitched and a faint voice came through the microphone. You can hear it clearly. A whisper saying, I thought that hearing a voice on my phone was the end of it. But it was only the start, and I wish I had never checked that video because now I can't stop hearing that same tone. The low, almost polite whisper that doesn't sound angry. It just sounds sure of itself. Like whoever it is already knows I can't do anything about it. The day after I found the recording, the house felt colder even though the heater was running. My mom said maybe I caught a cold, but when I stood near the wall where the thermostat hangs, I could feel a small draft coming from behind the drywall, a kind of slow breathing in and out like air being drawn through a tiny crack. That night I decided I wouldn't tell my parents. I wanted to prove to myself that this wasn't just fear left over from... Before I set my phone on the table again, camera facing the hallway, I sat on the couch pretending to read while keeping one eye on the door. Nothing happened for nearly an hour until exactly 1:17. Again, the second hand hit the mark and the air shifted, like pressure dropping before thunder. The light above the stairs flickered once and went dark. Only that bulb. Everything else stayed on, but the shadows on the wall stretched too far, like the corners of the room got longer. Then the floor creaked. Upstairs, slow, heavy steps, 1, 2, pause, 3. I looked up at the ceiling and whispered, Mom, thinking she might be up, but no answer. Just another step closer to the top of the stairs. I turned the phone toward the noise, still recording, still trying, to convince myself it was just the wood settling. And that's when my phone buzzed. A message notification, unknown number. No name, just words in the preview line that read, I'm behind you. I didn't look back. I ran straight to my parents' room, threw open the door. Both of them were asleep, breathing steady, completely still. I shook my dad awake, told him someone was in the house. He jumped up, grabbed the old baseball bat beside the dresser. We checked every room. Nothing doors, locked windows, latched, even the basement sealed shut like always. But my phone kept buzzing, more messages, same number, each one a few words. Stop looking, go back to sleep. You know me. I showed my dad, but when he took the phone, the screen went black. Battery dead, even though it had been on 70% a minute earlier. The next morning I charged it and turned it on. The messages were gone. No history, no unknown numbers. Nothing, just the same photo background and my missed call log. Except there was a new entry, timestamped 1:17 a.m. an outgoing call to our landline. I didn't make that call. The house phone was still unplugged from the night the police came. Daniels came back later that afternoon after my dad called him. He listened to everything, watched the video from the night before, but this time there was no glitch, no whisper, only silence. He asked if I still had the recording that said, "Tell them I'm home." I opened the file, but it was blank. 0 seconds long, he stared at me for a long time, and finally said, "Maybe the phone is compromised, maybe someone's remote accessing it." But later, when he stepped outside to make a radio call, I heard him talking quietly to another officer saying, "The kid's telling the truth. It's the same pattern from 2008. That night." He left a small recording device behind one of those old police pocket recorders. He told me to leave it running all night, pointed toward the hallway, just in case he'd pick it up the next morning. I didn't sleep. I lay there counting minutes until sunrise, when Daniels came by at 8 a.m. I handed him the recorder. He didn't say a word, just took it and left. Half an hour later, he called. My dad asked to meet him in town. When Dad came back, his face was pale. He told Mom and me that the recorder didn't capture sound, not even static, not one byte of data, but its internal clock showed it had been turned off and on again 3 separate times during the night. None of us touched it. Since then, every night at 1:17, the same shift in the air happens, and I can feel it before. It starts like the world holds its breath. The lights hum, the dogs outside go silent, and there's that faint low humming again, coming from somewhere inside the walls. Daniel said he's putting a surveillance van near the edge of the property tomorrow to monitor frequencies. He said he wants to prove it's something technical, not paranormal. But the look in his eyes told me he doesn't believe that either. I keep thinking about the message on my phone. You know me. I've been replaying the old news clips from 2008, the photos of my dad's coworker, the man who did all of this, and every time I look at his face in those grainy pictures, I swear his eyes are looking straight at me. It's like he's still here waiting for another 1:17 to come. They told me the feed cut out at 1:17 a.m., the exact same time everything had happened. Before they said all the monitors went black for exactly 73 seconds. When they came back, the house was empty. The doors were still locked from the inside. The windows untouched, the basement door half open like someone had started going down but never came back up. The officers thought it was a power glitch. They searched the whole property and found nothing. No sign of me. Not even footprints in the mud outside, only one thing. The recorder in the living room was still on, still spinning its red light, blinking as if it was saving something. They played it right there in the cruiser, but there was no sound, just static and a faint breathing underneath. Then a voice, very faint, almost like a whisper, right against the mic. It said, "Tell them I'm home again." And then laughter, but not through speakers. It came from outside the car, like someone standing right behind them, laughing softly. They checked the back seat. It was empty. They looked at each other and decided to leave the place sealed. That was 3 nights ago at least. That's what the officer told my parents when they finally opened the case report. They said no signs of forced entry, no clues, no reason for the equipment to fail at the same second on every device, no trace of me anywhere. My phone was found on the kitchen table screen, cracked recording. Still open, the last image was the hallway just before it went black. You can almost make out a shape near the stairs, something tall and bent. Like it shouldn't be standing that way. They said it was just motion blur. But I remember it. I remember what it looked like. I remember how it moved. Sometimes when the wind hits the windows at night, it sounds like someone tapping from the inside. The neighbors say they still see lights flickering in the house, even though power's been off since the police sealed it. One of them said he heard a boy's voice calling from the yard saying, "I'm still here, come home." If anyone reading this is from Corbin, Kentucky, and you ever drive past County Road 19 and see a house with boarded windows and a red porch light, don't stop if you hear someone laughing or a kid's voice. Asking for help, keep driving, and whatever you do, don't look in the rearview mirror because sometimes I can still see the reflection smiling back. Edit 1. I didn't think I'd ever log back into this account. The police closed the investigation 3 days after they sealed the house. They said there wasn't enough evidence to continue. My parents moved out of Corbin, but they still get phone calls from an unknown number every night at 1:17 a.m. When they pick up, no one speaks. All they can hear is the same faint static that was on the recorder. I came back to this post because something strange happened last night. Someone sent me a private message here on Reddit. The account was created today. The username was HomeAgain117. The message only said, "You left the light on downstairs, John." When I checked my inbox again a few minutes later, the message was gone. So was the account. Edit 2. I don't remember writing the first part of this story. I mean, I know it's my account, my username, my style of writing, but the timestamps don't make sense. I was supposedly missing that night, so how could I have posted anything? I went back through my old drafts. The file wasn't on my laptop anymore, but there was a folder called Home I don't remember creating. Inside was an audio file, just heavy breathing and a whisper that repeats my name. The weird part is the metadata says it was created April 10th, 2008. That's the same date from the original case in Corbin, Tor 3. A user named Corbin Witness commented earlier saying they lived near County Road 19 and saw police cars there again 2 nights ago. They said the house isn't sealed anymore. They saw the porch light flicker red around 1 a.m. I checked. The timestamp of their comment, it was exactly 1:17 a.m. When I clicked their profile to message them, it said, "User deleted. Edit 4. I moved states last month. New house, new life. I told myself I'd never talk about this again. But the same thing started happening here. The motion light outside my window flicks on every night at the same time. The other night I tried to ignore it and record audio instead. When I played it back, I heard myself whispering, "Don't look in the mirror this time." The voice was mine. I swear it was. Edit 5. Final. I think I finally understand what "tell them I'm home again" meant. Maybe it wasn't him talking through the recorder that night. Maybe it was me. Maybe whatever happened in that house didn't end when the cameras went black. The lights are flickering right now. I can hear footsteps on the porch. I live alone. If anyone finds this account and I haven't posted again, don't go looking for me. And if you ever hear laughter near your window around 1:17 a.m., don't look. Because if you do, you might see me smiling back. It happened a few years ago when I was 16, living with my parents in a quiet rural town in northern Alabama. Our house sat at the end of a long gravel road, surrounded by endless trees and thick forest that always looked darker than it should. The nearest neighbor was half a mile away, an older man who rarely came outside except to get his mail. It was peaceful most of the time, the kind of place you'd only hear crickets and wind at night. Peaceful, until that night. It was a Friday evening in late November, cold enough for the windows to fog from the inside. My parents had gone to Huntsville for a late dinner and wouldn't be back until after midnight. I'd been home all day after school playing games, scrolling through my phone, doing what teenagers do when no one's around. The house always creaked a bit at night, especially when the wind hit the siding. But I'd grown used to it. Around 10:30 p.m., I was in the living room with a bowl of chips, half watching a movie on Netflix, when the motion light outside flicked on. Now, that wasn't unusual. Animals sometimes triggered it, but this time it stayed on. I looked out the front window expecting to see a raccoon or maybe a stray dog. Nothing, just fog and trees. I remember thinking the light must have glitched again. Then I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 soft but deliberate knocks on the side door. I froze. That door led to the carport, and nobody, ever came through there. The front door had a clear path, the side was almost hidden. I muted the TV, heart thudding in my ears, waiting for another sound. After about 20 seconds, nothing. I laughed nervously to myself, telling myself it was the wind or maybe the sound of branches. But then came another sound. Tap, 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 this time from the kitchen window. I stood up slowly, every part of me screaming not to move, but curiosity won. I crept toward the kitchen and peeked through the curtain. There, under the yellow light of the carport, was a shadow. Not clear, but tall wrong somehow. Like someone standing just far enough out of sight that you couldn't tell if they were really there. I grabbed my dad's old flashlight from the counter and shined it through the glass. Nothing, the space was empty. I exhaled, half relieved, half terrified, and locked the kitchen door before running back to the living room. Minutes passed. The movie kept playing, but I couldn't focus. I texted my mom, told her I thought someone was outside. She replied a few minutes later. "It's probably an animal, honey. Lock the doors, keep the lights on, we'll be home soon." I tried to believe her. I really did. But deep down I knew it wasn't an animal. At exactly 11:14, I remember the clock, I heard something drag across the porch. A heavy scraping sound like metal on concrete. I turned off the TV and listened. Scrap, scrap. Then silence. I was gripping the flashlight so hard my knuckles hurt. I moved toward the front window again and looked through a small slit in the blinds. What I saw made my stomach drop. My parents' old garden rake was leaning against the porch railing earlier that day. Now it was gone. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the window, and that's when I heard whispering. Not from inside, from outside. Low, faint, like someone trying to call my name but holding it in their throat. I ran upstairs, locked myself in my room, and called my parents again. No answer this time. My signal was weak, typical for out there. I sat on the floor with the flashlight pointed at the door, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself think. Then came the footsteps. Slow, heavy, crunching on gravel outside my window. The beam of the flashlight shook in my hand as I aimed it toward the glass. For a split second I saw it, a face, pale, expressionless, pressed against the window pane, eyes wide open, staring right at me. I screamed and dropped the flashlight. By the time I picked it up again, the face was gone. When my parents finally got home at 1:37 a.m., I was still sitting there, shaking. I told them everything. My dad thought it was a prank, maybe some teenagers messing around. But when he stepped outside to check, his voice went quiet. The rake was jammed into the ground in front of my window. Teeth pointed upward like a warning sign. And in the soft dirt beneath it were dozens of footprints, not bare, not booted, just wrong. The shape didn't match anything human. Long toes, too many of them. My dad followed the prints to the edge of the woods where they simply stopped. Like whoever's or whatever made them had vanished. The next morning we found the side door handle twisted and bent. The metal was warped like it had been gripped by something far stronger than a person. We still live in that house, but my room's been moved to the other side. I don't stay home alone anymore. And every winter, when the fog rolls in thick and the woods go quiet, that same motion light outside still flickers on. For no reason at all. I couldn't sleep that night. Every creak, every whistle of the wind sounded like footsteps. Every shadow seemed to move. I stayed awake, clutching the flashlight like it was my only lifeline. The snow had stopped falling, but the air was thick and cold like the forest itself was breathing. I thought about calling the police, but what could I say? Some shadow in the woods. A face at the window that vanished. I didn't want them to think I was crazy, so I stayed put. Listening, the wind picked up and I swear I could hear whispers coming from the trees. I turned the flashlight toward the woods and for a brief moment I saw a figure. It was tall, thin, and moved in a way that no person should move. It seemed to glide or float, its head tilted, unnaturally. And I froze in terror. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. The whispers got louder and I realized they were saying my name. John. John, John. I dropped the flashlight. It slid across the floor and I scrambled to grab the phone. My hands were shaking. I dialed 911. My voice cracked as I tried to explain what I saw. The operator asked for my address, and while I was talking I heard a branch snap just outside my window. I could feel the presence so close I could feel its eyes on me. I whispered to the operator that someone was outside. She told me to stay on the line and the police were on the way. I tried to keep my breathing quiet. Every noise I made seemed to echo into the night. I watched the shadows on the walls of my room. Flicker and twist, I felt like the darkness itself was alive. Then the flashlight turned on by itself, its beam swinging across the room, highlighting nothing, and then everything at once. I saw the figure standing in the corner. My heart stopped. It was staring at me, and it grinned, a smile too wide, too sharp to be human. I screamed into the phone and it vanished. The call dropped. I tried to call again, but the line was dead. I ran to the door, but it wouldn't budge, like it was welded shut. My parents were hours away and I was trapped alone. I backed into the corner and hugged my knees, waiting for the police to arrive. Every minute felt like an eternity. I heard scratching at the windows, tapping like fingernails on glass. Then a whisper. Right next to my ear it said, "You can't hide from me, John," and I swear I could feel breath on my neck. I swung the flashlight around and again. Nothing but the room felt smaller and colder. I stayed like that until the first lights of the police. Cars flashed across the snow outside. They came in shouting and searching the house. I showed them everything, but the corners seemed to hide more than they revealed the footprints. The rake, the broken door handle. Nothing explained what I saw. The officer said it was probably a prank, someone messing with me, but I knew better. I could still feel it watching, waiting outside, and I swear, I saw its eyes in the reflection of the cruiser windows as they drove me to my parents and told me it was safe for now. The police stayed for about an hour. They checked the yard, the windows, the woods behind the house, but of course they found nothing. Just tracks half covered by snow leading to nowhere. They said it was probably kids or someone trying to scare me and that they'd patrol the area for the next few nights. But I could tell they didn't believe me when they left. I sat on the couch, still holding the flashlight. The air in the house felt wrong, heavy, like the walls were breathing. With me, I didn't sleep. I just waited for morning, watching the dark corners of the room, waiting for something to move. When the sun finally came through the windows, it felt fake, pale and sickly, the kind of light that doesn't warm anything. I tried to convince myself it was over, but deep down I knew it wasn't that night. My parents decided to stay home with me. They said they didn't want me alone after what happened. My dad kept his gun close, and my mom tried to make everything normal. We watched TV, had dinner, talked about school. It almost worked until around midnight when we heard it again. Faint at first, like something brushing the side of the house. My dad muted the TV. We all listened. The sound came again, louder this time. A dragging noise across the back wall, then 3 hard knocks, bang, bang, bang. My mom grabbed my hand and my dad ran for the back door yelling, "Who's there?" But when he opened it, there was nothing but the freezing air and the sound of the forest. My dad stepped outside with the flashlight. The beam cut through the mist and we saw footprints again, fresh this time, deep and long, like whoever it was had been running. But what made my stomach twist was that there were more of them now. Dozens, circling the house, overlapping as if multiple people had been walking there for hours. My dad backed inside and locked the door again. We called the police. They came 20 minutes later. They walked around, took pictures and said they'd install cameras on the property to see if someone was stalking us the next day. They set up 2 motion cameras, one facing the forest and one near the side door that had been hit before we spent the day pretending everything was fine. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Even when I looked at the cameras, I could swear there was movement at the edge of the trees. Something dark, flickering just beyond sight that night. I tried to stay up, but exhaustion got me, and I fell asleep. On the couch, I woke up sometime around 3 in the morning to a low humming sound. It wasn't the TV. It wasn't the fridge. It was something outside, steady and deep, like chanting. I sat up and listened. It was coming from the woods. I looked out the window and saw faint lights between the trees, small orange glows like candles moving slowly in a circle. I woke my parents. My dad grabbed his gun again. We went out to the porch, and the moment we stepped outside, the chanting stopped completely, and all the lights vanished. Just darkness and snow. We stayed frozen for a minute before going back inside, locking every door twice. The next morning, the police called. They said one of the cameras had triggered around 3 a.m. They wanted to show us the footage. When we got there, they pulled it up on the screen, and I felt my heart stop. The video showed our backyard dark and quiet. Then at exactly 2:58, something moved out of the woods. It was tall, thin. Its arms hung low, almost to the ground. Its head tilted to the side, and even though the face was blurry, I could see its eyes, two bright white circles staring directly at the camera. It moved closer, 1 step, 2 steps, and then the screen went static when the image came back. The thing was gone, but there were handprints on the lens, long fingers and marks like claws. The officer asked if we wanted to stay somewhere else for a while, but my dad refused. He said he wasn't letting someone scare us out of our home that night. We all slept in the living room, lights on, gun close, and the forest whispering outside, waiting. That next night we tried to act like things were calm again. My parents didn't talk about what was on the camera. They said maybe it was a trick of light, maybe snow, maybe someone edited it, but I saw the look in their eyes. They knew it wasn't. That we tried to sleep early, but no one really slept. The wind outside had that same deep hum, and I could almost feel something leaning against the walls, breathing with us by midnight. I was lying in the living room, staring at the ceiling. The light from the TV flickering on and off. I don't remember closing my eyes, but suddenly I was awake again, and it was completely silent. The TV was off. The lights were off too. I thought maybe the power went out, but the clock on the wall was still glowing. Red, it said. 2:33. I tried calling out to my parents, but my voice came out dry. Then I heard it from upstairs. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, measured steps that echoed through the ceiling. Boards. My dad was next to me. He was already awake. He looked up and whispered, "Did you hear that?" I nodded. The footsteps stopped, then started again, but this time faster, as if whoever it was running from one end of the hallway to the other. My mom was crying softly, holding my hand. My dad whispered, "Stay here," and took the flashlight. He went up the stairs, the steps creaking under his weight. I could see the beam of his light sweeping across the walls. Then it stopped. He froze. I could tell because the beam wasn't moving anymore. He whispered something, but I couldn't make it out. Then he yelled, "Get out." Now his voice cracked and the flashlight dropped clattering on the floor upstairs. My mom screamed. I grabbed her hand and we ran to the door. When I looked back, I swear I saw something at the top of the stairs. It wasn't my dad. It was too tall. It was crouched low, its head tilted too far to the side like it was studying us. Its eyes glowed in the faint light from the dropped flashlight. I ran out into the cold, barefoot, the snow burning my skin. I didn't stop running until I reached the end of the driveway. My mom was beside me, shaking. We called my dad's name again and again, but no answer. Then, from inside the house, we heard him yell, "John, get back inside now." His voice sounded wrong, like it was trying to sound like him, but not quite right. I yelled again, but it just repeated my name slower. "John, get back inside now." I told my mom to stay there, and I crept closer to the door. The house was dark except for the faint flicker of the flashlight upstairs. I stepped inside. The air was freezing, and every sound felt like it echoed forever. I whispered, "Dad," but there was no response. Just that faint creak of wood from upstairs. I picked up the flashlight and pointed it up. The stairs, the beam landed on the ceiling, then the railing, then on something wet. Red smears across the wall like someone had dragged their hand. I kept moving slowly, step by step, until I reached the top. The hallway was empty, but the door to my room was wide open. I could see something on the bed, a shape under the blanket, shaking like someone was breathing under it. I took one more step and the blanket stopped moving. The flashlight flickered and went out. I ran. I didn't care what it was. Ran back down the stairs, out the door, straight into the road until my lungs felt like they were on fire. My mom and I waited in the car with the engine running until the police arrived. They searched the house again. They found the flashlight, the red marks, the blanket, but no trace of my dad. They thought maybe he went after whoever was inside, but they couldn't find footprints this time. Nothing at all. No prints, no sign of struggle. Nothing. They checked the cameras again. One was broken, cracked down the middle. The other showed static for hours until just before we ran out. You could see the front door slowly open on its own. The police stayed until dawn, then told us to go stay with family. So we packed a few things and left. But before we drove away, I looked back at the house. The upstairs light was on and someone was standing at the window. Tall, thin, watching. We stayed with my aunt a few towns over, but I couldn't stop thinking about the house the way it sat in the dark, forest like it was waiting. The police came by the next day with search dogs. They combed the woods around the house calling my dad's name. The snow was melting, leaving footprints from the night before, scattered and half washed away. The dogs didn't find anything, not a trace of him, I knew. Deep down it wasn't human or animal that took him. It was that thing, tall, thin, with the wrong head, the eyes glowing, that had been watching us for weeks. I tried to sleep that night, but every time I closed my eyes, I could see the footprints circling the house. I could hear the whispering in the forest telling me to come back. John, come back, John, come back. I didn't know if it was my imagination or if I was hearing it through the walls of my mind. The next morning, my mom called the police again, saying we needed to go back to gather more things. They reluctantly agreed, and I drove us slowly down the gravel road. The forest on either side looming like giants. We reached the driveway, and the snow had mostly melted, leaving mud in weird patterns. I saw the rake again lying on the side porch handle, snapped and twisted. Like last time, the side door was open, just slightly swinging in the wind. But there was no wind. The house felt darker than ever inside. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped in. The smell of cold and damp hit me, almost like something was rotting inside the walls. I called out, "Dad," nothing. The staircase loomed above me. Every creak sounded louder than a gunshot. I stepped slowly up the stairs, the flashlight beam jittering across the walls. Then I saw it. The shape crouched in the hallway, thin, elongated limbs, head cocked too far to the side. It stared at me, eyes glowing white. I screamed and it vanished, just like that. The police who followed me upstairs later said they didn't see anything. The upstairs room was empty. The footprints in the snow had left the porch. But now inside the house, new footprints had appeared. They were deep, twisted, long toes, and they led from the hallway to the bedroom to the window. Then they just stopped. I grabbed the flashlight again and looked through the window. The forest was empty. The snow bare, nothing. But as I focused on the trees, a faint light flickered deep in the woods, tiny orange glows moving in a circle. I shivered. The way it moved wasn't normal. It rotated slowly, then vanished. I tried calling the police again, but my phone had no signal. The house seemed to be holding me there. I couldn't leave until the sun came up. I watched the floorboards, the walls, the corners of the ceiling, imagining movement behind every shadow. The rest of the day I couldn't speak. I couldn't move, just sitting, staring at the forest, waiting for night to end. The police returned at dusk, bringing flashlights and cameras again. They set up more motion sensors along the forest edge as they left. They told me to stay inside and call if anything happened that night. I couldn't sleep that night either. I kept hearing it, whispers, footsteps scratching the wood, scratching the walls, then the sound of breathing from the hallway. The lights flickered. The air felt thick. I could barely move, and then a low groaning started from the living room. It got louder and louder, like a chorus of voices saying my name. John, John, John. I crawled to the phone and dialed 911. My voice shaking. They told me to stay calm. Stay on the line, I did. The groaning stopped. Then a high, thin scream pierced the air. It wasn't human or animal. It was something else. I froze. I wanted to run, but couldn't. The hallway shadows stretched across the walls, and I could see something moving. Just barely. The beam of the flashlight on the floor revealed a tall, thin silhouette, and its head tilted to the side. It grinned at me. The smile stretched impossibly wide, then it ran down the stairs toward the front door. The door slammed and the windows rattled. I dropped the phone and the flashlight fell on the floor, flickering, and I ran out into the snow barefoot, my mom behind me screaming. We got in the car and started it, and the police finally arrived. By the time we left the house, it felt alive behind us. Lights flickering, the forest shadows shifting, and I swear for a moment, I saw my dad's shape in the window staring at us, his eyes white, his head cocked to the side, and then he was gone. That night we stayed at my aunt's house, but I couldn't stop thinking about our home. The forest looming behind it, the darkness thicker than usual. I kept imagining shapes moving between the trees. I barely slept, staring at the ceiling. When the phone rang, I jumped. My mom answered it. I heard whispers, low and hurried, like someone was breathing into the receiver. Then silence. She hung up and told me it was probably a wrong number. But I knew it wasn't the wind at all. I decided I had to go back to check on the cameras to see if anything new was happening. The police agreed, but only if I went with them. And my mom came too. The car ride was quiet, tense. The trees on either side of the road looked like they were leaning toward us. The house finally appeared in the distance, dark and still. But I felt it watching us even before we parked. We stepped out into the cold. The air smelled of damp earth and rotting leaves. The snow that had been there was melted, leaving the ground soft and uneven. We entered the house. The front door creaked like it was warning us. I grabbed the flashlight, and the police set up the laptop showing the feed from the cameras. We watched the forest edge the side door. Everything seemed normal until 1:47 a.m. when the side camera flickered static, and then a shadow passed across it, too tall and thin to be human. It glided from the trees to the side door, then vanished. The camera feed returned, but the shadow wasn't gone. It was inside the hallway, moving slowly toward the stairs. We all froze. I couldn't breathe. The officers tried to reassure me it was probably a glitch, but the movement on the screen didn't stop. It crouched low, then straightened up, tilting its head to the side, that wrong angle, the white glowing eyes. It grinned at the camera, impossibly wide, and then it disappeared. The next feed showed the living room floor. The police swore no one was in the house. But footprints appeared crossing the room. Deep, long toes dragging across the wood, then stopped right in front of the front window. The air seemed to thicken. The temperature dropped, the flashlights flickered, and I swear I could see the reflection of the figure in the glass behind us. The officers looked too, but said nothing. The next hour was a blur. Whispers, footsteps knocking on doors and walls. The sound of breathing coming from empty rooms. The shadow moving just at the edge of the cameras. The static flickering constantly. It was studying us, learning. Our patterns. At 3:03 a.m., the upstairs camera caught something impossible. A shape standing in my dad's room door. It wasn't human. The limbs too long. The head tilted too far to the side. I screamed and ran upstairs to check the room. The door was wide open, the bed empty, but the blanket moving as if someone was under it, breathing heavily. I grabbed the flashlight. It flickered, and the beam landed on nothing. Then the blanket jerked violently, and the room went dark. I backed out, stumbling down. The stairs. The police followed, but every step I took, the air grew colder, heavier, as if something was pressing on my chest. The whispers getting louder now, chanting, "John, John, John." In low, harsh voices, the forest outside the window seemed to reach into the house, stretching shadows across the walls. I tried to stay calm, but I could feel it moving behind me. The officers tried to grab it, but there was nothing there yet. Everything felt alive. The hallway stretching impossible distances. We stayed. In the living room, the monitor showing nothing now but every shadow moving in the corners. I felt its eyes on me. I could feel it learning. I could feel it waiting for the next moment. Then the front door slammed and the windows rattled. I ran toward it, the officers yelling, my mom screaming behind me. I opened the door and the cold air hit me. The forest dark and empty, but I swear I saw two glowing white eyes in the distance, moving slowly and then vanishing into the trees. The night after the cameras showed the shadow, I couldn't sleep. My room felt wrong, every corner stretching impossibly, the air thick with something watching me. I stayed awake, listening to every creak, every whisper, every sound of the house settling or moving or breathing. I kept checking the cameras on my phone. The side camera, the upstairs camera, the living room feed, everything flickered like static, and I swear for a moment, I saw movement that shouldn't exist. A figure, tall, thin, crouched with its head cocked to the side, its glowing eyes staring at me from the screen. I tried to blink it away, but it didn't move. It just watched, then disappeared. I called the police again, and they promised they'd send someone tonight. I waited hours, the forest outside. My window was black, but I could feel it waiting. Then footsteps came from upstairs, slow, deliberate, heavy, measured steps. My dad's room door creaked open. I grabbed the flashlight, but it flickered out. I could hear whispers around me. John, 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 low guttural voices breathing against the walls. I tried to run, the door slammed shut on its own. The windows rattled, the air thick and freezing. I backed into the corner of my room, the bed shaking as if something heavy was on it. I screamed and swung the flashlight. It flickered, then came back on, and I saw it crouched there on the edge of the bed, Limbs impossibly long, head tilted unnatural. A grin stretched across its face, too wide and sharp to be human. Its eyes glowing white. I tried to move, I couldn't. It spoke in my mind, no words, just a presence telling me it was always here, that it was mine, that I could never leave the house. I blacked out somehow. When I came to, my parents were screaming, my mom on the phone, the officers banging at the door. We ran outside into the freezing night. The forest black and silent, the snow hard under our feet. I looked back at the house. The upstairs window light flickered, and I swear I saw my dad standing there, pale and frozen, his head tilted to the side, too far, too wrong. The thing wasn't gone, it had him, it was him now. The officers searched the house again. The cameras showed nothing except static. The footprints inside the house had multiplied, impossible, overlapping every room, leading nowhere. We stayed in a hotel for a week, but I could feel it watching the empty house even from miles away. The phone lines sometimes crackled with whispers. John, 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 and when I turned on the news, sometimes I could swear I saw a shape in the background watching from a distance. Weeks later, the police told us they found nothing else. No evidence, no prints, no trace of whoever or whatever it was. My dad never returned. He was gone without a trace. The thing had taken him, or maybe changed him into something I couldn't understand. I never stayed home alone again. I sold the house eventually, but the new owners never lasted. They left after one night, telling people the place felt wrong. The forest around it, thick and dark, always moving, something waiting, and I never forgot the way those eyes looked. The smile too wide, the way it studied me. And now whenever I drive past that road, I feel it watching me. John. John, John, calling my name from the dark. Waiting for the right night to come back for me or anyone who thinks the house is safe. I keep telling people the story, but they laugh. They don't understand until it happens to them, until they see the shadows moving just at the edge of their sight and they feel the breath behind their neck. The house is alive, and I know it waits.